Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. Heat warnings trigger more safety warnings.
We've now flipped the switch where we're seeing kind of our first heat spell of the year.
Rivers could rise pretty substantially with the temperatures.
This is what climate change brings to us.
A look at the risks brought on by the summer heat. Plus, Vancouver pool shortage.
We could have built 5 more of them for the cost that it would be today.
Kids Pool won't reopen until August 7th, leaving outdoor swim capacity in Vancouver lagging well behind other cities. Also, peak season on strike.
I hope it doesn't go on for very long, I guess is the main thing.
A lot of things are closed inside, but the staff are still trying their hardest.
Harrison Hot Spring hotel workers walk off the job on one of the busiest weekends of the year, catching guests off guard.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Happy Friday, I'm Tanya Fletcher. Thanks for joining us. Well, this heat wave is settling in just in time for the weekend. Environment Canada has just expanded the extreme heat warnings now to cover much of the province. New warnings have been issued for northeast BC and much of the southern interior as well. And whether you're embracing the heat or trying to beat it, caution is being urged. From the sun and on the water to emergency call centers, our Lynn Britton takes a look at the risks.
The mercury is rising and sun-seeking crowds are sure to follow. Patios are throwing shade at their patrons in a good way.
It's excellent. We've been waiting far too long for this. May and June were not great in terms of weather, and so we're happy that Mother Nature has graced us with her presence finally.
Beaches may be one of the biggest draws. To prevent too many waves of visitors, Bunsen Lake Beach in Anmore is reminding people to reserve parking or leave the car at home.
Over the course of the 2 or 3 years that we have been implementing this system, we have seen traffic reductions by 90% of what they used to be.
Summer fun is sure to be on the minds of many this weekend, but do keep in mind that in the lower mainland and parts of Vancouver Island, temperatures could crack the low 30s, and in Kamloops, they could reach as high as 40 degrees.
We've now flipped the switch where we're seeing kind of our first heat spell of the year.
Environment Canada is warning people to brace for potentially scorching heat.
I wouldn't call this a heat dome, but what I would say is, yeah, we definitely should anticipate more heat warnings in the near future.
This is climate change. This is what climate change brings to us.
Many cities like Maple Ridge are making preparations for those trying to beat the heat.
And we have to be prepared to help our residents to stay cool. We don't want to see some of the tragic accidents that were happening a couple of years ago during the heat domes.
First responders, too, are preparing for a busy weekend. Ambulance dispatchers are urging British Columbians to keep 911 lines free for emergencies only. The hot weather means higher fresh water levels as climbing temperatures trigger a rapid melt.
Just the general public may be looking towards rivers, lakes, creeks to cool down, but at the same time, they actually may be moving very, very fast. And also very, very cold.
Still, BC's River Forecast Center says there is no risk of flooding at this point. Temperatures are set to remain higher than normal into next week. Liam Britton, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, despite those words of caution, a man in his 20s died Wednesday while cliff diving at Lynn Canyon on the North Shore. He was with a group of friends at Twin Falls. Police say he didn't know how to swim and hadn't jumped off a cliff before. He surfaced unconscious and was in the water for about 20 minutes before rescue crews could get to him. The man was given CPR on scene and later airlifted to the hospital where he died shortly after. Well, good news for swimmers. Kids Pool is going to reopen August 7th. The surprising news comes after officials announced last month that the pool would remain closed at least through the summer due to a slew of maintenance issues.
This thing means so much to families, to people that, are bringing their kids here, their families here, people that are training, people from all over the planet who actually specifically come down to swim in Kids Pool. You are making a difference. So thank you so much.
Mayor Ken Sims says repairs are currently underway to keep the pool operating for another 2 years while plans for a new one are developed. City Council passed a motion last week paving the way for the replacement of Kids Pool. The city is considering a dedicated fund for donations and corporate sponsorships to make it happen. Well, options to take a dip in an outdoor pool are limited in Vancouver these days, with that aging Kitts pool closed until August 7th still. The city is left with only 2 full-sized public outdoor swimming pools. And as Karen Larson is finding out, comparisons to other major Canadian cities show Vancouver is seriously lacking.
Summer is here, the kids are out of school, and things are heating up. But cooling off in an outdoor pool in Vancouver isn't as easy as it used to be. Popular Kitsilano Pool is out of commission, leaving the city with just 2 full-sized public outdoor pools. Compared to other major Canadian cities, that's not many. Montreal, for example, has 63 outdoor pools. Toronto has 58. Even Regina, with a third of the population of Vancouver, has 5 outdoor pools. 15 years ago, Vancouver Park Board promised to build a new outdoor pool in Mount Pleasant Park and set aside this land. But funding requests keep getting shot down by Vancouver's other elected body, City Council. Pool advocates like Marjorie Duda are frustrated.
If we had built this back when we were in the draft capital plan several years ago, we could have built 5 more of them for the cost that it would be today. And now that we're down to only 2 outdoor swimming pools in Vancouver, I think somebody needs to step up and deliver on this commitment before the other 2 outdoor pools fail.
A new pool was also promised at the Marpole Community Centre, now under construction in South Vancouver. However, due to rising costs, the pool, seen here in renderings, is now in limbo, with no commitment for funding and no expected date of delivery.
Over there is the pool. I'm pretty sure that's where it's going to go.
Mike Burdick is president of the Marpole Community Association. He says locals deserve to know when they're getting their pool.
Does that mean in a year, 2 years? 100 years? I don't know. Nobody knows, and nobody will tell you, of course. When they put out those renderings and all that publicity about what we're going to do, then all I want is for them to do it. Don't promise something and then not do it, because that's not right.
Over the years, Park Board has named pools a priority, but money remains the sticking point.
Park Board has a strategy. We're connected to the community. We understand the demands and needs of having outdoor pools. The city has not put money behind it.
Kitsilano Pool is scheduled to reopen August 7th, assuming repairs are successful. Karen Larson, CBC News, Vancouver.
For those looking for somewhere to swim outside of Vancouver, outdoor pools in Kamloops and Port Coquitlam are opening up for free. And because the Sandman Centre in Kamloops is not open at the moment, officials there say people can swim for free at a number of pools during public swim times when there's a heat alert. In Port Coquitlam, Mayor Brad West says that city's decision came after feedback from parents in particular who say they appreciate having a free family activity through the summer. With that, let's bring in our Darius Madavi for a look at these expanded heat warnings. Sounds like much of BC is now blanketed, Darius.
Yes, that's right. And good news for people that want to go swim in the outdoor pool for free, or the pools for free in Kamloops. They just got a heat warning added just an hour or 2 ago. So across the board, many heat warnings now. These ones just added in the northeast about an hour ago. Expanded heat warnings, so now covering Fort St. John, Dawson Creek, Fort Nelson. That entire region, temperatures expected to get up to or exceed 30 degrees. We're over here on the coast. Again, extreme heat warnings. Now, we don't have the same criteria across the province. Of course, Kamloops gets a lot hotter than Terrace does, but as usual, it's just sort of adjusted for those different requirements. So everywhere you see a heat warning, though, still means dangerous heat is likely or almost certain to happen. Now, here, again, we've seen those ones already, but now extended down to Squamish, Howe Sound. We're seeing those heat warnings as well. Temperatures easily in Squamish reaching 30, 32 degrees even just this weekend, and then probably even hotter Monday and Tuesday next week. And of course, the southern interior, we're expecting to see the most severe temperatures, and over here expanded out into the West Kootenays. These heat warnings easily going to hit 40 degrees in places like Kamloops, the Osuyus, the Boundary Region, Lytton, Lillooet, the whole Fraser Canyon. Across the board, we're looking at very hot temperatures. So what the heat that we're already starting to experience today and will continue to experience in the days ahead are really just the start of it this weekend, Monday and Tuesday. You know, good time to go out and do an outdoor pool after work.
Yeah, no kidding. That's a lot of red there. You warned us it was coming, and here it is. So we'll chat with you again a little later in the show. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
More than 200 workers at Harrison Hot Springs Resort and Spa have walked off the job. They're set to strike for 3 days on one of the busiest weekends of the year after bargaining talks broke off Thursday. Our Saurabh Sandhu went out to Harrison Hot Springs to talk with workers on the picket lines and guests staying at the hotel.
This usually quiet and calm getaway town was woken up by loud chants Friday morning, with workers at Harrison Hot Spring Resort and Spa picketing out front of the hotel and puzzled guests looking on.
We did not know anything about this.
We were told that breakfast is supposed to be at 7 a.m. We arrived like 7:20 or something, and nobody was prepared.
Striking workers say the month-long wage negotiation with their employer has been unsuccessful, but the job action has left many hotel guests caught in the middle.
I guess we could get out of it, but we already paid for everything, so what do you do?
The union representing the workers says it has been bargaining for a new contract with the resort management. They're asking significant wage increase, better overtime pay, and advance notice of scheduling changes, some of which they say lost in the last round of negotiation during the pandemic 4 years ago.
Better pay, getting back what we lost, and recovering some of the benefits of being in a union.
Hotel management says it's actively working with the union reps to address concerns and reach an agreement, adding it appreciates the understanding of guests who have been affected. This group of workers behind me on the picket line includes 70-plus housekeeping staff responsible for cleaning and maintenance. And with 2 more days of job action planned, things could quickly turn ugly for the hotel management and the guests staying inside. Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, Harrison Hot Springs.
Over to Abbotsford now, where the city is working to contain a toxic spill of firefighting foam that leaked into Stony Creek. The city is warning residents to steer clear of the area and to keep pets away.
Yeah, so we're going to complete a full investigation and make sure that our policies and procedures line up so this doesn't happen again. You know, the city of Abbotsford does feel terrible, and we're working as quickly as we can to get this cleaned up and to get that area remediated. We fully pledge to make sure that we take whatever action is required to make this right.
This happened yesterday. The city has since hired a third-party contractor to investigate the long-term effects of contamination and confirmed some fish in the creek have already died. Local officials are working with provincial and federal levels of government now to keep the spill contained. There's no timeline on when the spill might be fully cleaned up. Now to something we haven't talked about in a while, but COVID cases in BC have reached their highest level since January. The latest monthly data from the BC Centre for Disease Control shows there are currently 204 COVID patients hospitalized. It's only the second time since January that hospitalizations have topped 200. In the last week of June, there were 435 new infections province-wide. The majority of hospital admissions are among adults over the age of 60. Well, plans for a community building are moving forward on the downtown east side. BC's housing minister says the redevelopment of an old Salvation Army temple will now envelop 3 more properties next to it as well. The project was initially planned for 2018 and was going to include 75 units. Well, now plans include up to 8 stories of below-market homes for people with low to moderate incomes, as well as homes for people dealing with homelessness. The first floor of the building will be dedicated to community health services. An application has been submitted to the City of Vancouver for demolition of the historic Salvation Army Temple to start this fall. Still ahead, summer has arrived in full force, yes, but it's often a time of food insecurity for many as well. We'll check in with Food Banks BC after the break. with this warm weather, you might be reaching for foods and drinks that are a little bit on the cooler side. So what's your go-to summer treat? We hit the streets to find out.
Sangria on a nice sunny patio. Yeah.
I'm a big salad eater, so the more interesting plants in my salad, the better.
Burgers and hot dogs. I do once a year a hot dog, and I love to eat it in the summertime at English Bay.
There's like cold buckwheat noodles you like. It usually comes in this like cold anchovy broth.
I mean, I eat a lot more spicy food in the summer too because I find it cools me down when I sweat too.
I enjoy like a nice watermelon juice in the summer. Yeah, just nice and refreshing. Food-wise, probably just mangoes. Now they're in.
But for some people, summer is a time of food insecurity. For example, families whose kids were getting meals at school might now struggle to put food on the table over these months. Food Banks BC says demand has increased by nearly 60% overall since 2019, and that 1 in every 3 food bank users is a child. For more on this is Dan Huang Taylor, Executive Director of Food Banks BC. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me on.
First of all, how are you seeing demand shift now as we head into these summer holiday months?
Well, historically, summer has been a quieter time for food banks in BC. But in the last couple of years, we just haven't seen that same seasonal dip that we once saw. It's just consistent demand. And the loss of access to food in schools inevitably results in more families turning to food banks over the summer break.
Is it just food insecurity overall driving that need, or are there other factors at play too, given those seasonal shifts you've seen in recent years?
Well, there's different reasons that people will need to turn to food banks, but there's also other ways that food banks might support over the summer. We see an increased need in emergency food access supports as a result of wildfires and other major weather events. The food banks activate during these times, and whether that's feeding evacuees or feeding first responders, it's a very busy and challenging time for food banks. But as we saw in that weather forecast, it's not just the risk of fires, the risk of this intense heat, particularly to seniors and people who need to access hunger relief services but maybe can't do it safely, presents another challenge as food banks need to get services to those people who need access.
Is there a 1-2 punch, perhaps, where not only is demand rising, but also donations are slowing through the summer months?
Well, the trend of increasing demand and diminishing supply has been something we've seen over the last 18 months or so. It's a trend that we continue to see, and it's creating this additional level of challenge for food banks and other hunger relief charities, because the need to support this increasing demand has never been greater. I mean, we hit a very unwelcome milestone in April of this year. We saw over 100,000 unique visitors for the first time ever. And, as you mentioned, you go back to 2022, around the same time, it was about 75,000. So this increasing and ballooning demand and the ability to, for people to donate is more challenging than ever. So this creates some difficult times at food banks.
On that note, what are some ways people can help out their local food banks right now? I mean, donations are obvious, food donations. Anything else they can do?
Well, where people can support through providing a financial donation, that obviously is always welcome at a food bank. But your time, if someone is able to volunteer at their local food bank and lend a hand, it's something that food banks rely on deeply in order for them to support the clients that they're serving. And the numbers of clients has never been greater, so the need for volunteers is right up there as well.
Well, we appreciate your insight on this today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me on.
That's Dan Huang Taylor, Executive Director with Food Banks BC.
Okay.
Still to come, UK's election delivers a dramatic win for the country's Labour Party, ending 14 years of Conservative rule. More on the aftermath of those results coming up next. Welcome back. Across the pond, there is a new government in the United Kingdom. The Labour Party is back in power, ending 14 years of Conservative rule with a historic election victory. Labour now has nearly 2/3 of the seats in Parliament. But as Briar Stewart explains, smaller parties gained ground as well.
Britain's new Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, was cheered as he arrived at Downing Street after a landslide win.
Our work is urgent, and we begin it today.
Even before all of the ballots were counted, it was clear that British voters handed the Labour Party a big victory, and the Conservatives a humiliating defeat. Under leader Rishi Sunak, the Tories won their fewest seats since the party was founded nearly 200 years ago.
I have heard your anger, your disappointment, and I take responsibility for this loss.
He said he would step down as party leader, but not right away. Shortly after Sunak was out, a procession of soon-to-be Labour cabinet ministers arrived one by one as government business got underway.
Most governments go through some kind of honeymoon.
This political scientist says despite the outcome, there doesn't appear to be overwhelming public enthusiasm for Labour.
Oppositions don't win elections, governments lose them. I think Keir Starmer had brought the Labour Party back into the centre of British politics and given people at least a safe alternative to vote for, which they didn't feel they had.
Millions also cast their ballots for smaller parties. Britain's Liberal Democrats walked away with around 70 seats, while Reform UK, a right-wing party, won 5.
You're going to bring us division.
Its leader, Nigel Farage, was heckled during his press conference, a sign of the simmering divisiveness.
Boring.
The new parliament will meet next week, but there are no illusions that the much-promised change will be quick.
To change our infrastructure, our healthcare systems, it's going to take 10 years.
I think it hopefully will change. Let's stay optimistic, but I'm weary of it, so I'm sceptical.
Even before the new parliament officially begins, Keir Starmer will be off on his first international event as Prime Minister. He's going to Washington, D.C. next week for the NATO summit. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
To American politics now, and after days of speculation and with pressure building to step aside, U.S. President Joe Biden sat down today for an interview with ABC News. It's part of his ongoing effort to recover from last week's debate debacle, which has supporters and critics alike questioning his competency. Our Paul Hunter now with more from the interview and the hurdles ahead as Biden tries to reassure voters and his own party that he's up to the job.
Mr. President, thank you for doing this.
It was among the most anticipated interviews in memory for a sitting U.S. president. In an exclusive interview with ABC News anchor George Stephanopoulos, at issue, the only issue for countless Americans. Can Joe Biden demonstrate he's capable of doing his job and that he's mentally fit to be reelected for another 4 years?
But it seemed like you were having trouble from the first question in, even before he spoke.
Well, I just had a bad night.
Are you the same man today that you were when you took office 3.5 years ago?
In terms of successes, yes.
Do you dispute that there have been more lapses, especially in the last several months?
Can I run the 110 flat? No. But I'm still in good shape.
Are you more frail?
No.
And on it went. Earlier. As if to underline, the age thing now follows U.S. President Joe Biden wherever he goes, walking on stage in Wisconsin with a pro-Biden crowd, and one of those cheering him on pulls out a handwritten sign. There it is. Pass the torch, Joe. The placard with its blunt message waved right at him.
A lot of discussion about my age. I know I look 40.
Biden is in crisis mode. His campaign for re-election seen by so many as in shambles.
President Biden,
ever since that debate last week with former President Donald Trump, in which, at times, Biden seemed to full-on lose his train of thought.
Everything we have to do with, look.
More stumbles have followed in the days since. In a radio interview, he seemed to say he's, quote, proud to be the first black woman to serve with a black president. And he reportedly told Democrat governors this week he needs more sleep and shouldn't schedule events past 8 p.m. This as multiple Democrat lawmakers now publicly call for Biden to depart, and as multiple major campaign donors threaten to suspend donations until he quits. With Donald Trump's lead in some polls for the White House now widening, pressure for Biden to bow out grows. Even as he stood alongside Vice President Kamala Harris at 4th of July celebrations, there were reports a team of insiders is readying a plan for her to take over. But in Wisconsin, defiance.
Well, let me say it as clearly as I can. I'm staying in the race.
And that's the CBC's Paul Hunter reporting. All that glitters is not gold, but never mind that. These days, copper is a hot commodity, and people are going to great lengths to get it. The CBC's Paula Duhachik explains.
Copper wire is a valuable commodity at this Vancouver scrapyard.
More people are, I guess, aware that the price is very high, so everyone's trying to get their hands on it.
Not all of them legally. Statistics Canada says theft of metal, including copper wire, is on the rise, a trend that's dovetailed with growing demand.
The problem is that over the last 10 years or so, we haven't been putting up enough investment to provide sufficient supply to balance the market.
The Canadian telecommunications industry says thieves often get their copper wire off telephone poles. This can cause service outages affecting thousands of people.
To me, it's a life safety issue because people depend on our network to be able to contact emergency services, so fire, ambulance, police, and so on.
Provinces like BC and Alberta now require people to have government ID to sell at scrapyards, but the Canadian Telecommunications Association says we need tougher national laws so the risk of stealing copper outweighs the reward.
Theft that causes outages, that brings down telecommunications infrastructure should have significantly higher penalties than they do today.
A spokesperson for the Department of Justice says the criminal code already has a range of options to punish copper thieves, and that a proposed new sabotage offense would also target the crime. Still, some say debating punishment is the wrong conversation.
And you have to look at why are these people stealing copper? Why are they risking being electrocuted? Why are they risking being arrested? And all this stuff is because people are desperate for one reason or another.
He says addressing problems like drug addiction and mental illness would pay off better in the long run. Paula Duhachik, CBC News, Calgary.
There's a perception that a big reason for BC's housing crisis has to do with a supply shortage, but you might be surprised to learn that might not always be the case. About That's Andrew Chang shows us why so many urban living spaces cannot find a buyer or tenant and how that strikes fear in the owners.
I want to show you something. Cute little condo in Toronto's Harbourfront neighborhood, bustling part of the city. It goes on the market. In the summer of 2022, the sellers put it up for $480,000. It didn't sell. Early 2023, it's back on the market for $460K. No luck. Later that year, posted again at $450K, still nothing, and a few months ago, the sellers tried again at $430,000. No takers. This condo was sitting on the market for more than 400 days without a sale. Right now, in Canada's biggest cities, there's a ton of condos like this struggling to sell. Condo sales in Toronto, for example, haven't been this low since the financial crisis in 2009.
Condo flippers are getting absolutely slaughtered right now.
In majority of these towers, they are half empty.
Nobody wants these condos, folks. And here we are in the middle of a housing crisis. It's never been harder to get into the market. And so many of these condos spend so much time sitting empty. Why? That studio we just showed you, we're pretty sure an investor bought it because just a month after it did finally sell for $80K under its original asking price, it was listed for rent.
I think the number one problem is that most of the condos that are listed on the market are investor units.
Investors have really thrown the market out of whack. And when I say investor, I don't want you to think of some, faceless corporation or ultra-wealthy real estate mogul. According to Stats Canada, the typical condo landlord here is actually a, quote, middle-aged, middle-class couple. And for these people, the intention is usually to cover their monthly mortgage payments by renting it out. For decades, this was considered a pretty smart move. Condos were cheap relative to every other kind of property, but their value was rising. And the average rent that landlords could charge tenants was rising steadily too. But now?
It's changed quite drastically. I mean, anecdotally, with my own investors, I shy away from new condos just because of the numbers just don't really make any sense.
Yes, the numbers don't make sense, which has led to an insane number of condos being put up for sale, flooding the market in a way we haven't really seen before. I'll show you what I mean. Let's compare what a condo investment in Toronto looked like in 2016 to today. So according to the Toronto Real Estate Board, the average price of a one-bedroom condo back then in 2016 was about $300,000. And with 2016 interest rates, about 2.7%, that worked out to a mortgage payment of about $1,100 a month. Rent for the average one-bedroom apartment at that time was about $1,660. Not bad from an investor point of view. Even with, maintenance fees, property taxes, that condo is essentially paying for itself while you build equity. Now, what if you were to buy a one-bedroom condo today in Toronto? That could cost you about $550,000, so prices have very clearly gone up. But so have interest rates. The carrying costs on a property are far higher than they ever used to be. Well, not ever, but in recent memory. At current rates, 6.8%. Maybe now you're paying more than $3,000 a month for your mortgage payment alone. Then you've got, property taxes, maintenance fees, and the average rent for a unit like that, about $2,400 a month. You're now paying out of pocket.
The average investor is going to be short about $1,000 a month now, right? And that's a tough pill to swallow.
So jack up the rent, right? Well, it's not that easy. Paying more than $3,000 a month for a one-bedroom just isn't possible for most people. The market can only bear so much.
No one will pay the rent that would allow you not to go broke owning that property.
Now, historically, the average investor might try to stick this kind of thing out because the assumption has always been, even if you're losing money in the short term, in the long run, you'll still come out on top. Over the past couple of years, condo prices in many big cities have more or less stalled. And in some cases, depending on when these people bought, their investments might already have lost value. Condo prices in Toronto, for example, skyrocketed between 2017 and 2022. This was great for investors, but many wondered if they were actually becoming overvalued, if there were too many of these condos being built to sustain these prices. At the end of 2022, those prices started to drop, which is especially bad news for investors who've bought since then.
Now the renewal has come in and you're losing a lot of money, but you've actually come to realize in the last 12 months, the price of that condo has probably dropped about $40,000. So you're starting to enter into a state of actual fear.
So no wonder you have so many mom and pop landlords now saying, enough is enough. I'm going to try to sell before I lose any more money. But there's also another group of investors, the pre-construction buyers. And for a lot of them, things are even more dire.
There's some buildings where up to as many as 12 or 15% of the buyers are saying, no, I'm not going to close. Okay, I'm walking away from my deposit.
In the past, in a city like Toronto, you could pretty reliably put money down on a pre-construction condo, wait 2 to 5 years till it was built, and then sell that unit before anyone ever moved in. In most cases, the value of that investment would go up 20, 30, even 40% without you having to do much at all.
From the year 2000 through to, right about to 2020, that was true. But now it's not true. That's absolutely not true.
So these units are completing and they're not worth what the investors paid for them, right? So they paid $1,500 a square foot, but they're only worth $1,300 a square foot.
So some investors are trying to bail on a bad investment. Some can't afford the carrying costs, and lots of them are all in this situation at the same time. So you end up with a flood of condos on the market. But isn't that the very definition of a buyer's market? Like, isn't this great news for people who want to jump in? Well, it would be if these condos had actually been built for the people looking to buy. According to StatsCan, the average size of a new condo in Toronto has shrunk significantly over time. From 1981 to 1990, new condos were on average about 1,000 square feet. From 2016 to 2020, they were around 650 square feet, or about 40% smaller. And if you ask anyone who lives in the downtown core right now, 650 square feet actually feels pretty big.
This is what a 275 square foot condominium looks like in downtown Toronto.
Look how small this bedroom is in this Toronto condo for sale that I was showing.
This is the den. This little cutout in the wall is the den, okay? Doesn't even fit an entire table.
Developing these smaller condos targeted specifically at investors who then turn them around for rent, that was a real business opportunity.
Investors want small units. The yield is better, the price is lower, it's easier to qualify.
According to realtors, it's these teeny tiny investment condos that are currently flooding the market in places like the Greater Toronto area.
Broadly in the GTA, we're looking at over 13,000. Majority of these suites are investor units that are listed for sale.
And if you think about it, if those condos were built for investors, just renting them out or flipping them, the focus probably wasn't on quality or functionality or families. Some of these places don't even have closets. According to the realtors we spoke to, investors aren't generally very choosy about whether the floor plan works, whether the finishes are first rate, or what the view looks like, because they have no intention of moving in. They just want the best value for their money. But if someone's taking their entire life savings and putting it into a home that they plan to live in for years, that's a pretty different story.
There was absolutely no thought given to the idea that anyone would buy that place, that sub 500 square foot condo, as a place to permanently live.
Right now, for example, in Toronto and Vancouver, 3/4 of larger condos, the ones, maybe more suitable for a family, built decades ago, those are being lived in by the people who own them. But for those much smaller condos built after 2016, with investors in mind, only about half are being lived in by owners. Remember that cute little studio that we showed you at the start that took 400 some days to sell? It was 330 square feet. Here's a 2-bedroom, 700 square foot unit in that same building. It sold earlier this month on the first try in just 13 days.
If we look at the large cohort of buyers right now, they're predominantly millennials that are looking to enter the market. If you're looking to start a family, it's really tough to start a family in a 1-bedroom condo. Or even if you don't have a family, if you are a millennial and you're a couple, let's say you have a dog, or if you work from home, you need that additional space to be able to either work or raise a family or even just have a guest bedroom. So when we look at the amount of inventory that's available, there's just really nothing. There aren't a lot of options out there.
The analysts we spoke to all said they do expect the price of these smaller units to come down over the next 6 months or so. That doesn't make them any more ideal a place to start a family. But if the price made more sense, that takes some of the sting off, right? Either way, it seems both sides of the housing equation are stuck. Sellers driven to sell can't, and buyers don't like their options.
Still ahead, how do you plan to beat the heat? Well, some seniors in Kamloops have some tricks to stay cool, with temperatures there set to spike to 40 degrees in the coming days. We check in with them next. Welcome back. With the heat wave settling in across much of BC, many people are trying to figure out ways to stay cool. In Kamloops, temperatures are expected to hit 40 degrees Celsius by Tuesday. So our Shelley Joyce stopped by an apartment complex for low-income seniors to find out how they're coping.
Laura Douglas is 72 and prepared for the heat. She took advantage of an offer from BC Hydro to get this portable air conditioning unit for her one-bedroom suite.
I turn it on. If I stand right in front of it, it's cool. It was 78, and it took over an hour to bring it down to 74. My bedroom, I think, is too warm for sleeping. So I don't have a portable fan. I may have to get one.
Not all of these apartments have air conditioning units. Many tenants are approaching the heat wave with humor and ingenuity. Laura Douglas is prepared to sleep on the couch.
Next week, when it gets into the 40s, I may sleep on my couch and have the air conditioner on and the ceiling fan right here. So that's probably an option. I think people have to start thinking of options, for sort of plan ahead. For when it's like dead air and hot, stifling.
Paul Eberhard is 78 years old. He lives in the same building as Laura, and he has no air conditioning at all. But Paul figures he lucked out by not landing a suite in direct sunlight.
My apartment is quite cool. I don't feel concerned for myself, but I do feel concerned for some of the other elderly people. I make lemonade. I just made I just made fresh lemonade this morning. I like making lemonade, and I have ice cubes.
Homemade lemonade helps. So does getting outside, even in the extreme heat. Laura Douglas says that the seniors in this building have figured out how to stay cool by chasing the shade and hanging out in the garden.
So in the morning sun is there. This has a lot of shade right here. In the evening, when it gets hot there, we move to the back of the building. So if you know an elder person that has no air conditioning, maybe give them a call to make sure that they're okay.
Temperatures in the interior are expected to soar to 40 for Monday and Tuesday. For CBC, I'm Shelley Joyce in Kamloops.
It is going to be hot, Darius, and I know that's not good news for the fire danger rating.
No, Tanya, remember what this looked like just earlier this week on Monday? Mostly green, a little bit of pockets of yellow. Now we're seeing that orange spread down already, and we haven't even really gotten into the heat yet. So next time we check in on this on Monday, expect to see some pretty big changes. Now, all this is happening because of this ridge of high pressure that's continuing to build in over BC. Heat dome over California, bringing temperatures there up even hotter than they're going to be here. Parts of Death Valley, possibly setting world records over 50 degrees Celsius. Here we're just getting the north end of that. So definitely a heat wave, not going to be the sort of heat dome that people in BC usually associate the term with, but definitely getting much above seasonal, 10, 12, 15 degrees above seasonal in some places. That also means that ridge of high pressure that we're not going to get very much rain at all. Very little is even possible across the province over the next few days, maybe a tiny bit in the southeast, but even there, not much. Our highs are continuing to climb over the next few days, and by sort of early Monday, Tuesday, we're going to see the highest temperatures that we probably will, hitting 40 degrees in some places across the province, as we said earlier. But even if you're not hitting 40, we're talking severe heat all across the board, including here on the coast, where the humidity is also going to be a big problem, making it feel 5 or 6 degrees warmer than it actually is. So across the board, something to be concerned about before those temperatures slowly start to come down in the north, at least. Also something to talk about. We heard about some people talking about the climate change aspect of this. And as you can see here, our highs today, tomorrow, and as we get into Sunday, increasingly being affected by climate change. So basically, the darker this is, the darker red, the more likely climate change has made that temperature. Our lows, however, are climbing up more slowly. Still not great. That's why we're starting to see those heat warnings across more of the province, but still a little bit better. And then nothing but sunny skies across the province tomorrow. And same thing here in Vancouver. Don't have to spend much time on this, Tanya. That's the story.
Foreseeable future. Okay, thanks, Darius. And yes, it's Friday. That means it's time for Fun Fact Friday. And so, Darius, given the heat theme, you're going to tell us about some interesting ways that animals stay cool.
Yes, for us people, the most effective way is to sweat, because that sweat carries our heat out, and then when it evaporates, it pulls that heat away. But not all animals can sweat, only really humans, some primates, horses, some cows and sheep in them. But look at the kangaroo. They have come up with a very special way of cooling off instead, because instead of sweating out through their skin, they find another way to get themselves wet, which is to really just licking their forearms, which is adorable. And then that saliva on their forearms can then carry that heat away for them. So then they don't need to rely on the sweating aspect of this. They still get that evaporation, that heat being pulled away. And that's the same reason you see hippos wallowing in mud or elephants spraying themselves with water. But that's not the only way to do this. Let's take a look at this desert-dwelling fox, which is also the smallest dog in the world, about a quarter the weight of a chihuahua. Tiny, adorable. Those big ears are really good at venting heat, getting it carried away. But also the fennec fox. If you've ever seen your dog pant when you go for a long walk in the heat, nothing on the fennec fox, which goes from taking about 20 breaths per minute to up to 690 breaths per minute to just get all that heat away and out of the body. So amazing and adorable little creatures.
Fascinating stuff. Okay, thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
Up next, good news for roller coaster fans at Playland. We'll show you a new ride after the break. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. CBC returns as a media partner of the Surrey Fusion Festival, July 20th to the 21st. The festival features over 50 cultural pavilions that will incorporate the theme of landmarks of the world into their displays. For more information, visit surreyfusionfestival.ca. And never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter and keep connected with us.
The Squamish Nation is celebrating its second annual Memorial Squamish Nation Youth Powwow.
And the all-ages event celebrates Indigenous heritage, art, and the spirit of youth.
I'm excited to dance and compete.
And I'm excited to watch him and all the other people who are here to dance.
That's one of the key things I think comes about from this powwow, is that they get to meet different people from different places.
There will be dance competitions, drumming contests, an artisan market, and traditional foods. The powwow is on through Sunday at Capilano Reserve Park.
A new roller coaster is opening up at Playland tomorrow. The Thunderbolt has a 60-foot drop and fits 12 passengers.
The coaster's themes are wild energy and electrifying speed.
It's been under construction for more than a year and cost the park $16 million. Something you want to go on, I know, very much.
Yes, I think we should do weather on the roller coaster.
Done.
I think people would love that.
Next week.
It's very windy, is what I'll say. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
Janella Hamilton will have your next local news at 11 o'clock right here after the National. Good night.